Hey everyone, welcome back to 5G Guys, Storytelling and Predictions. I'm Dan McVaugh, and today is a follow-up to an episode we dropped very recently with guest Nathan Leamer on the topic of net neutrality. I'd like to share a few stories, some thoughts, and a prediction or two at the back end on what I think is going on with net neutrality, my experience with how of things it might impact, and a prediction on what I think might happen if it does indeed stand. So if you haven't listened to episode 63 with Nathan, go check that out after you listen to this or before, either way. But make sure you listen to both because I think he brings out some important points, some great topics and education for us. But I think you'll want to hear my thoughts on it and my predictions of what I think could happen. Quick reminder of what net neutrality is. So basically, back in the Obama administration, the FCC decided to adopt a concept that would basically classify telecommunications service providers as being subject to Title II under the Communications Act. And what this really means is it says and it dictates that a telecommunications provider cannot discriminate any traffic of any kind that they carry, regardless of device, application, platform used, what have you. So on the surface, it sounds like a great idea to thwart would-be bad actors in terms of large internet service providers or tech companies that might want to do something like prevent your access to, let's say, Google search engine unless you pay a higher premium for your service or something of that nature. But as we get into my experience and some storytelling, I'll get into it right now. In the last 4 or 5 years, we haven't seen any bad actors do this. So I think it's a concern that on the surface seems valid, but in actuality, we haven't seen it play out as a reality. But I want to tell a few stories from my experience in my career in telecom that I think could speak to some unintended consequences that we could see if net neutrality is in fact reenacted as currently passed by the FCC by reclassifying telecom as a Title II service. And the first I want to go back to is in 2000, late 90s, early 2000s, 1999 to be exact. I was overseeing fixed wireless access data service that we were using at US West when I worked there. And we were using it as a way to extend our DSL broadband internet service to homes and doing a lot of what T-Mobile and Verizon doing today and AT&T getting ready to do. And what we were concerned about was we had limited capacity on each of our nodes, wireless nodes in the network. And we could see a situation where during congested usage times, we would have customers all suffering because we're exceeding the capacity of the overall network at any given moment. And so we're trying to determine the best way to mitigate that. And through quite a bit of analytics, statistical calcs, we determined that in certain situations, if a user, say, wanted to upload a very large file, that we were actually better off letting that user's data packets have full capacity or expanded capacity over other data packets from other users and applications to get them on and off the network as quickly as possible. And we found that what this would allow us to do is provide a better overall experience for all consumers as a whole versus saying, hey, we have to treat all data, all applications, all users' packets equally and not give any application or user priority access over any others. And so it was a key part of our strategy to maximize the experience of our consumers by being able to control how we let resources on the network be used for certain types of applications, certain data packets. It had nothing to do with, hey, this person paid more for service or less for service in terms of prioritizing their packets, but purely a way of doing network management, capacity management for our network. Another story that I'll tell is there's a number of cellular carriers today that they manage their overall network capacity by looking at the type of data that's coming over this network. For example, a cellular network operator might look at something like Netflix streaming and say, Netflix is streaming this at 1080p, but we're going to actually downsample it and we're going to limit it to 720p resolution because the reality is your phone can't see the difference between 720p and 1080p screen resolution because it's just this little small screen. So there's really no reason to take extra capacity off your network to push 1080p size data packets through the network because the end user is not going to see an experience difference in that case. And all it does is take away capacity from other data that you could have on your network. So in this case, I would want to downgrade those data packets to a lower resolution and allow other applications, other data packets to have a higher resolution. I think the most extreme one that I would hope that the powers that be, if this does get reenacted, would recognize and make some provisions for is FirstNet. FirstNet is a service that's dictated by the federal government that basically creates a private 4G, 5G network for first responders. It was the result of 9/11 when the Twin Towers came down and the entire cellular network just crashed. And so first responders that were relying on their cell phones were not able to communicate, just like nobody else was able to communicate. So what FirstNet is designed to do technically is to give priority access to first responders to the cellular network that they're using with FirstNet, and either degrade service to non-emergency traffic or even kick it off the network altogether to ensure the first responders have access to that network. Technically, by the letter of the law, under net neutrality, we could see that being deemed illegal and not being allowed to give priority access to first responders on that FirstNet network. So you can see that, well, maybe not thought through all the way or intended, there could be significant non-intended consequences to FirstNet and consumers and the like if net neutrality is in fact put back into play. So where we sit today is the FCC has said that we're reclassifying telecommunications as subject to Title II under the Communications Act, therefore non-discriminatory application of data packets, applications, users, and so be it. It's going to be challenged in the courts. It really will remain to be seen if the courts, how they side on that. If they do side to let net neutrality go back into effect, we could really be seeing the result of taking away some of the technical advances that we are hoping for. For example, with 5G and even beyond 6G, network operators are working on applications. Some of the next great applications we hope to see with 5G and 6G that take advantage of things called network slicing, for example, that partition out things like IoT traffic from sensors and devices on the network differently than, say, voice packets or streaming video packets or FirstNet first responder packets, and treat those differently, and they would have that taken away from them. So we could actually see the use of these networks in a way that literally could take away some of the advanced features that we are hoping to see and use in these advanced networks. My prediction is that I don't really have a prediction as to whether or not the courts or how the courts are going to rule, but if the courts do rule to uphold the current FCC's position and let net neutrality go back into play, I think we'll overall see consumers at a large scale experience a degradation in network traffic, network performance, because now operators no longer have the ability to control traffic in a way that's best for us as consumers. And I think we would also see some of the more advanced features that we are all hoping to benefit from 5G and beyond potentially not come to fruition as we all would hope. So hope you enjoyed this episode of Storytelling Predictions on net neutrality, and look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guy. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.